he has 12 things written down in the book, which I highly, highly recommend you guys read this book. It's such a great read, and it's a pretty easy read. So I'm going to just read the 12 for you guys first, and then I'll get like a couple comments, and then we'll kind of go into each of them after that. I've had a little bit of inspiration over the last week or so. Like I said a minute ago, I get so many DMs on Instagram, on TikTok, emails of just people reaching out with their thoughts, or they have a question about their kid or whatever. And I've been noticing that a lot, that I've been paying real close attention to the tone of the messages, which, to be fair, sometimes you can't tell what the tone of the message is, right? Like sometimes it's hard to tell in text how someone is saying something, but you can get a basic idea based on what they're saying. So I've been noticing that with certain messages that I'm getting, there's a little bit of like I'm doing the right thing, but these other people just don't get it tone to some of the messages. So it's like, okay, I'm a coach, for example, and I'm trying to get this kid to buy in. I'm trying to get the parents to behave better. I'm trying, but they just don't get it, or like they just don't listen, or they, and it's like a little bit of that blaming somebody else. And the point of this episode is not to say that you're always wrong as the person in that position, or the parent being like, oh, this coach is such a jerk, and I try talking to my kid about it, but the coach is just so overbearing, and it's their fault, and they're doing the wrong thing. And there's a lot of the blame tone of like, it's somebody else. And I'm not saying that's never warranted, because sometimes it is somebody else. Like sometimes the other person is just being a pain in the ass. But it reminded me of an episode that we did a long time ago. So this is going back to episode 67. I looked it up before we started recording, where we talked about leadership and extreme ownership, the book by Jocko Willink. We talked about that book. And I know most people have not been listening since we did that episode. And that's a really good episode, because we talk about the concept of extreme ownership and how even if things aren't your fault, acting like they are your fault can be really beneficial, and if you treat everything like you could do something about it, or like you had some responsibility in the problem, then you're a lot more empowered to fix the problem. And that's kind of the premise of that book. So
yeah, I think with what you're saying also is like, when it comes to that leadership principle, is it's very easy to say, I did my part, someone didn't listen, but sometimes it takes more patience. So when you see things fall apart, as you're saying, take ownership of it. Is like, did you do enough? Right? So, and even though it might not seem like it's your fault, like maybe there's something else or a different approach it can take. So that's the one thing.
Yeah. So extending from that book, Jocko, who I love Jocko, he's like, I would consider him a mentor, even though he has no idea who I am, because he just teaches so many good principles. So for people that don't know who Jocko Willink is, he was a Navy SEAL in the United States of America, as you would say.
Yeah.
And
we'll get a laugh from my friend in Chicago.
Yeah, that's right. And so he's just a business owner now. He runs like a whole bunch of stuff. He has like a consulting company. He has a supplement company. He has a clothing company. He has all these different companies. Has a really awesome podcast. And he's just like your typical, like, no bullshit, say it how it is, Navy SEAL guy. What you would think, without being like super raw macho about it. So that's why I've really, like, what he says really resonates with me. And he speaks in simple language, because he wasn't like a philosopher, and he's not a PhD, whatever, where he speaks academically. He just talks like a normal dude, and he just has extracted principles from being a Navy SEAL that are, I think, at least to me, they're super relatable just across life, any situation they're applicable. So the next book he wrote after Extreme Ownership, which I'll put some pictures up of these books so you guys can see, was called The Dichotomy of Leadership. And basic dichotomy is just how two contradictory things can be true at the same time. It's kind of what that means. And that happens when you're trying to be a leader all the time, where there's like two things that you have to be that seem like they contradict each other, even though they don't really when you put it in practice. So that book is awesome. And I want to talk about using that book as a little bit of a reference today, because in a lot of these messages, like I was saying, it seems like a lot of people are not understanding the flip side of whatever their situation is. So, they're the leader in this one situation, and maybe, let's say, as a coach, they are like, yeah, I'm trying to take control of my team. I'm trying to whatever, but maybe they're not empowering their players to take their own responsibility, for example. So there's a lot of these different things as a leader or in a position where you are supposed to be a leader, which could be a parent, which could be a player, which could be a coach, that you kind of have to have this both sides thing going on. You have to be able to play both sides. And that's basically what this book is about. And I wanted to run through like some of the principles on that, um, if that makes sense. So I was talking a lot there. Did what I say all kind of make sense
That
there, or
totally
whatever?
makes sense.
Do you have any
Yeah.
like summer, like anything to
Well,
add to
okay,
that?
so like if we keep that, you used a coach for an example, right? So, coach, let's say you're a very stern coach, okay, and that's your style, and that's okay. All right. Sometimes the dichotomy of that would be sometimes a stern coach has to have a little bit of compassion to get so do it my way or the highway, but you might see someone that, or the team, because that's really the big goal. The team needs to soften up so you can be stern, but at the same time as being stern, you can loosen things up in a certain area to, relieve some pressure or um, to get results, really, right? So if I'm always hard on you, constantly, Eric, and always hard on you, I don't give you any praise. It's just not my style. Maybe at some point I realize that my leadership right now to you is not working, and I need you need to know that I'm stern but I care. So I might have to pull you aside or have a moment or moments within my coaching to show that I'm also very flexible and I understand that you're trying, and et cetera, et cetera. So that would be like the dichotomy. He's very stern but always ever fair, or he cares.
And there's just so many examples across leadership that we're going to talk about a little bit. So I'm going to start with, he has 12 things written down in the book, which I highly recommend you guys read this book. It's such a great read, and it's a pretty easy read. So I'm going to just read the 12 for you guys first, and then I'll get like a couple comments, and then we'll kind of go into each of them after that. So the first one from the book, and I got these online, not directly from the book, so they might be like a little bit off, but it's the gist. Um, so in the first chapter, he talks basically just about how leadership is a dichotomy. So that's kind of what we were just talking about. So then these are kind of the principles that he lists. So here, first one is own everything but empower others. And then the next, be resolute but not overbearing. Nurture people but know when to let them go. Train hard but train smart. Be aggressive but not reckless. Be disciplined but not rigid. Hold people accountable but don't hold their hands. Be a leader and a follower. Plan but don't overplan. Be humble but not passive. And then the last one is be focused but detached. So there's, outside of that first one, there's 11 kind of key principles there that he talks about, which I think it perfectly summarizes what I've been feeling reading a lot of these messages that I've been getting of late, is just that both sides thing. So we'll run through these a little bit like one by one. It shouldn't take us too long to get through them. But